Is there a biological alarm clock that rings before the end? Or is it a spiritual whisper? In this episode of Mind, Soul, and Reality, we explore one of the most profound mysteries of the human experience, the knowing that death is near. For centuries, humanity has whispered about the knowing and inexplicable internal clock that alerts an individual that their time is ending. Is this merely a confirmation bias, where we only remember the predictions that came true? Or is there a biological or spiritual signal we have yet to decode? While skeptics dismiss these claims as coincidence, history is replete with accounts of healthy individuals settling affairs or saying unexpected goodbyes days before a sudden passing. This segment introduces our journey into the gray area between intuition and physiology.
Medically, the body provides concrete signals when death is imminent, a phase known as active dying. In the final days or hours, blood pressure drops, breathing patterns change to Cheyne-Stokes respiration, and skin models. Doctors and palliative care nurses can often predict death within a specific window based on these physiological markers. However, this is observation from the outside. The question remains, does the patient perceive these shutdowns internally before they become visible to the clinical eye?
One of the most baffling phenomena in medical science is terminal lucidity. Patients suffering from severe dementia, Alzheimer's, or comas who haven't spoken or recognized family in years suddenly regain total clarity and memory shortly before death. They may engage in deep conversation, joke, or express love only to pass away hours later. Neuroscientists struggle to explain how a damaged brain can suddenly reintegrate, but for many families this is interpreted as the soul preparing for departure. Can we smell our own mortality? Research suggests that dying cells release a specific chemical compound, putrescine, which humans may subconsciously detect. While we often associate this with decomposition, ancient evolutionary traits might allow an individual to sense this cellular breakdown before distinct symptoms arise. This olfactory warning system could trigger a primal sense of anxiety or resignation, which the conscious mind interprets as a spiritual knowing that the end is near. Hormonal shifts play a massive role in the dying process. Studies show a spike in stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline in the body as systems begin to fail. This fight or flight response, paradoxically occurring when the body can do neither, might result in a heightened state of awareness or anxiety. This biological alarm bell could be the root of the feeling of doom reported by patients suffering from cardiac events or pulmonary embolisms moments before death. There is a documented phenomenon known as psychogenic death or give-up-itis, where a person, often in a hopeless situation, simply wills themselves to die. Seen in prisoners of war or shipwreck survivors, the individual displays a distinct progression of withdrawal and apathy. Here, the prediction of death is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The mind decides the timeline, and the body dutifully follows, shutting down immune responses and vital functions in a display of supreme mental control over biology. A study by hospice researchers in Buffalo, New York, found that 88% of patients reported incredibly vivid dreams or visions in the weeks leading up to their death. Unlike normal dreams, these were described as more real than reality. Patients frequently saw deceased relatives, pets, or friends waiting for them or preparing them for a journey. Psychologists argue these are comfort mechanisms of the subconscious. The dying, however, insist they are actual visitations. Nurses often report patients using travel metaphors days before they die. A patient might anxiously look for their tickets, ask where their bags are, or state that the bus is coming. Is the brain relying on deep-seated linguistic metaphors to process the concept of transition, or is the consciousness actually preparing for a form of transit that our waking reality cannot perceive? In Vedic philosophy and Hindu scriptures, death is not an abrupt end, but a transition. Yogic traditions speak of the prana, life force, withdrawing from the limbs toward the center of the body. Advanced practitioners are said to be able to predict their death by observing the flow of breath in the nostrils, Swaradhya Shastra. When the breath flows continuously through the same nostril for days, it is believed to be a sign that the physical elements are dissolving, signaling death within months or weeks. Tibetan Buddhism offers a precise mapping of the dying process. The Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying describes the outer dissolution, where the senses fail one by one. The dying person may feel heavy earth element dissolving, then thirsty, water dissolving, then cold, fire dissolving. For a Buddhist, recognizing these signs is not a cause for fear, but a call to prepare the mind for the bardo, the intermediate state. The prediction here is a diagnostic tool for spiritual liberation. In the Christian tradition, predicting one's death is often framed as receiving the call. Biographies of saints and devout believers are filled with accounts of individuals who knew the exact hour of their passing, viewing it as a final grace from God to allow for confession and family blessings. This knowing is distinct from medical symptoms. It is often accompanied by a profound peace, contrasting sharply with the fear that typically accompanies the survival instinct. Islamic tradition holds that the exact time of death is known only to Allah. However, the approach of Malak al-Maut, the angel of death, is sensed by the soul. While the conscious mind may not know the date, the believer is encouraged to live as if death is imminent. Hadiths mention that as the veil lifts, a dying person might see angels, some bringing news of mercy, others of punishment, dictating their final emotional state. The prediction is less a forecast and more an unveiling of the unseen world. Many indigenous cultures around the world rely on omens to predict death. In various Native American traditions, the sighting of an owl during the day or hearing its call at an unusual time is a harbinger of death. These are not viewed as superstitions, but as an understanding that nature and humanity are deeply connected. The natural world vibrates with the change that is about to occur in the human community, signaling the disruption before it happens. It isn't just humans who predict human death. There are documented cases, such as Oscar the cat in a Rhode Island nursing home, who would curl up only with patients who were hours away from dying. Animals with their heightened senses likely detect the subtle pheromonal changes or the cessation of subtle vibrations in the body. Their behavior serves as an external validation that a biological shift is occurring, one that the patient might also be subconsciously sensing. From a physics perspective, life is a temporary resistance to entropy, the tendency of systems to move toward disorder. As the body's ability to maintain order fails, thermodynamic equilibrium, death approaches. Some theorists propose that consciousness as an information processing system might detect this rise in internal entropy. The feeling of death is the system recognizing that it no longer has the energy to sustain its complexity. Those who have survived near-death experiences, NDEs, often return with a vanished fear of death and a sense that they know when they will eventually return for good. They describe a boundary they were not yet permitted to cross. For these individuals, the prediction of their eventual death is not a guess, but a memory of a future appointment. They often live the rest of their lives with the certainty of what the transition feels like, removing the mystery entirely. There are thousands of anecdotal reports of crisis telepathy, where a person feels a sudden, sharp pain or overwhelming sadness at the exact moment a loved one dies, even if they are thousands of miles away. This suggests a non-local connection between consciousnesses. If we can feel another's death, it stands to reason we can feel our own. The signal is broadcasted. The dying person is the transmitter, and their own mind is the first receiver. Folklore from Germany and the British Isles speaks of the doppelganger, or the fetch, a spectral double of a living person. Seeing one's own double was considered a sure sign of imminent death. While modern psychology might classify this as autoscopic hallucination caused by brain lesions or schizophrenia, for centuries it was the ultimate prediction. The mind projects an image of the self, perhaps detaching from the body in anticipation of the final separation. The vagus nerve connects the brain to the heart, lungs, and gut. It is the superhighway of the parasympathetic nervous system. As the body shuts down, the vagus nerve activity changes drastically. This nerve is also deeply connected to our emotional regulation. A massive drop in vagal tone might be interpreted by the brain as a profound emotional shift, a letting go which the conscious mind interprets as the arrival of death. In traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, life is sustained by Jing, essence, and Qi, energy. Jing is finite, determined at birth. When Jing is exhausted, death is inevitable. TCM practitioners look for the separation of yin and yang, where the dying person might have a flushed face, false heat, or sudden restlessness. The prediction of death is based on reading these energy imbalances. The patient often feels this exhaustion of essence as a deep, unrecoverable fatigue that sleep cannot fix. Modern medicine often masks the natural signals of death with opioids and sedatives. While this provides mercy from pain, some argue it blunts the spiritual preparation and the knowing. Patients who are heavily sedated may miss the subtle internal cues that signal the end. This raises an ethical question. Does the numbing of the body disconnect the person from the profound experience of predicting and accepting their own finale? Psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross identified acceptance as the final stage of grief. Those who reach this stage often predict their death with accuracy because they have stopped fighting it. The energy previously used to deny the reality is released. In this state of surrender, the signal becomes clear. They tell their families, it is time, not out of fear, but out of a calm recognition of fact. Some quantum physicists like Roger Penrose and Stuart Hemroff propose the Org-Or theory, suggesting consciousness resides in quantum vibrations within microtubules of brain cells. If consciousness is quantum information, it exists outside of standard time and space constraints. Predicting one's death might be a moment of quantum non-locality, where the consciousness briefly accesses a future state where the biological anchor is already gone. Physical prediction becomes undeniable in the hours before death, with the onset of the death rattle, a sound caused by the pooling of secretions in the throat as the swallowing reflex is lost. For the family, this is a harrowing predictor. For the patient, it is usually painless. It serves as the final audible countdown, a purely mechanical signal that the systems required to sustain life have ceased to function. Do we predict death, or do we succumb to cultural expectations? In societies where voodoo death or hexes are real to the populace, a person cursed may die simply because they believe they will. The mind instructs the heart to stop. This suggests that the power of belief faith in a negative prediction is strong enough to override the biological imperative to survive. Conversely, many hospice nurses report patients holding on against all medical odds until a specific event occurs, a son arriving from overseas, a wedding, or a birthday. This is the opposite of predicting death. It is the postponement of it. It proves that the will has a tenuous but real control over the off switch. The prediction here is negotiated. I will die, but not until Tuesday. Atheist perspectives often view the prediction of death not as a spiritual event, but as the cessation of the self-illusion. As the brain fails, the construct of I begins to dissolve. The knowing of death is simply the consciousness witnessing its own unspooling. There is no afterlife to predict, only the returning of elements to the universe. For many, this offers a profound nihilistic peace, the end of struggle. The truth likely lies in a synthesis. We are biological machines that emit chemical signals when breaking down. We are psychological storytellers who use dreams to process trauma. And we are spiritual seekers looking for meaning. Predicting one's death is likely a combination of all three: the body signaling the brain creating a narrative, a dream or vision, to make sense of that signal, and the soul, if you believe in it, preparing to launch. If we could know the exact moment of our death, would we want to? The mystery of our final hour drives human ambition, art, and love. Whether the prediction comes from a drop in blood pressure, a visit from an angel, or a sudden intuition, the message is the same. Our time is finite. The science explains the how, religion explains the why, but only the individual can experience the now. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of existence. We explore the big questions that lie at the intersection of science, spirituality, and the human experience.